All right, welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar with cybersecurity expert Derek A. Smith. In Windows accounts, hackers covet most, tricks they use, and how you win on defense. We're super excited to have Derek here. It should be amazing content, and we're ready to get started with him. You're also joined by BeyondTrust security engineer Joe Stotts, who will run us through a BeyondTrust overview and demo towards the end of the webinar, so please stick around for that. My name is Sarah, your webinar host today. A kind reminder to please submit your questions via the chat box in the GoToMeeting console anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll cover your questions at the end during our Q&A time. Also, today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive a link to the recording and the slides shown here today. There's a lot of them within 1 business day from now, so you can refer back to it and share with your colleagues, etc., moving forward. So at this point, I'd like to hand it on over to Derek, who's going to jump right in. He has a lot of stuff to cover, so Derek, please jump on in. The line is all yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. It's always great to be here doing these. I look forward to them when they come up. Again, my name is Derek Smith. I'm going to introduce myself. Some of you have already probably attended some of my webinars, but if you haven't, this is me. I'm Derek Smith. I am right now a government IT program manager. I'm also a university professor. I teach at the University of Maryland and at a university here in Virginia called Virginia University of Science and Technology. I've been teaching for about 25, 26 years now, business classes as well as cybersecurity, because I'm kind of an overachiever. I have 8 college degrees, so I can teach a variety of different subjects. All right, that and get a cup of coffee with those. I've authored a book called CyberSense, the Leader's Guide to Protecting Critical Infrastructure. I also wrote a chapter for a book called Cybersecurity in Our Digital Lives, and I wrote a small book called Conversational User Behavior Analytics. I write a bunch of white papers that can be found out there on the web, on the internet, and I'm on a couple of boards. I'm on the Prince George's Community College Computer Information and Technology Institute board, and also for the Washington Center for Cybersecurity Research and Development. So I do a lot of this cybersecurity stuff. Before that, I do a lot of training. I do a lot of training for various organizations. But before that, I spent almost 20 years as a special agent or a federal agent for various government agencies too. So when I talk about security, I talk about it from often a security aspect or background, not just a technical background, but also from my law enforcement viewpoint, because I think it puts a different spin on it. I really think people who are in law enforcement and security understand the concept of security, whether it's IT security or physical security or what have you, a little bit better than someone who's just a technical person, let's say, who decides that he likes security. So I give you that perspective. So with that being said, today I want to talk about Windows accounts and how you can protect your privileged accounts in Windows. As you all know, well, here's what this is all about. We're going to look at how PAM works in your Windows environment. We're going to look at the different types of privileged accounts, Windows privileged accounts, why privileged access security is important for Windows environments. I'm going to take you through the life cycle of a hack attack. And I'm actually going to talk about how to defend against that life cycle, and also look at the anatomy of a particular type of attack that PAM is vulnerable to, and that's called pass the hash. And that's not the kind of hash that you might be thinking about, right? Pass the hash. And I'm gonna talk about that and what it is, and kind of give you an idea about that. Some problems that PAM can solve for you, how to secure Windows privilege access. We're going to look at a 3-step process, kind of a roadmap for securing your privileged access accounts. I'm going to give you a few best practices, 3 best practices, and talk about how you can establish it in your environment. And then my partner Joe is also going to talk to you and try to give you a way forward as to how we might be able to help you. He might be able to help you in establishing PAM in your Windows environment. So with no further ado, let's jump right into this. I have a lot of stuff I want to talk about with you. First of all, let's look at what's the challenge. What is the challenge? So we know that Microsoft Windows, if you don't know, you will know, okay? It's undeniable for everybody that Microsoft products are currently used all over the world. Who doesn't have Microsoft? I was listening to a guy give a presentation yesterday, and he said that him and his wife got rid of their Windows environment and they only use Linux. Well, even with that, you're going to run into Microsoft Windows everywhere you go probably. Microsoft report that 80% of Fortune 500 companies are in the Microsoft cloud, and more than 400 million devices is running Windows 10. And even here's a better number for you: 1.2 billion people use Microsoft Office in 140 different countries and in 107 different languages around the world. So it doesn't matter what your feelings are about Windows versus some other product like Linux or Unix or something like that. When it comes to security, the fact of the matter is that you probably use it sometime during your day, and therefore you need to know how to protect your privilege of Windows accounts. So here's the challenge. Microsoft Windows privilege accounts, including admin accounts, Active Directory service accounts, domain admin accounts, these are prime targets for outside hackers and malicious insiders when they want to seek to escalate their privileges. They want to get into your endpoint, compromise your system, and then escalate privileges so they can do a lot more damage later on. It's important because if we don't discover these Windows privilege accounts, don't know what we have, and we're not protecting them everywhere on our server and on our desktops, there's a possibility they can be compromised. Okay, it says they represent one of the most significant attack surface vulnerabilities of all IT systems, and we again have to protect those. So, Active Directory is what we use in basically in Windows, and I'm going to talk about that in just briefly before I get into this. But Active Directory admin accounts are vulnerable to attacks, and we're going to talk about the vulnerabilities of those as we go on. But Windows Service Administrators, they need to use domain admin accounts to perform their standard administrative tasks on a daily basis when they're utilizing these kinds of accounts. So ideally, and we get into this later, but Active Directory domain admin accounts should only be used when privilege is required. You shouldn't be using this if you're a sysadmin for doing regular stuff. I worked at a variety of places, but one place I worked at, the Army Research Lab, I think it was, the guys, I would go in and do a survey and take a look, and the guys who are system admin would be out there on the internet using it for other stuff. And they were doing this because it was the Army Research Lab, so things were pretty locked down. So their regular user account wasn't giving them the privileges that they need to look at the stuff they want to look at. So they'll go out using their admin accounts. Now, what is the problem with that? If any of you all are security people, you know that that's a big problem, because if that account was compromised, you compromise at the administrative level, and you can do just about anything you want inside the organization after that. Second bullet there says these accounts should only be used by a single administrator for accountability. They shouldn't be sharing a password. Now, I've seen in environments where this is the admin password and all the admins use it. No, 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 no. How am I going to know if you or me, Derek, or anybody else was the person that caused a particular thing to happen? Now, it's not that I want to punish you. The thing is that I need to go back and talk to you and find out, where were you? What did you do? How can I fix this thing without knowing what it is I need to fix? Okay. And then these accounts are highly susceptible to pass the hash attacks because their passwords are not frequently changed. And again, I'm going to give you a detailed breakdown of what the pass the hash attack is all about. So we get to that in just a few moments. I think before I get started, I think I want to make sure I level set and have everybody understand what privileges are and what I mean by a privileged account. I never usually do this because I assume everybody knows it, but I'm going to hit it this time with just one quick slide. So your privilege is a right of an account to perform various system-related operations on a local computer. Okay, so it's the right of the account, like your user account or your group account, to perform those system-related operations on that local computer, like shutting down the system, like loading device drivers onto your system, like changing the system time and things like that. So this is different from your regular or normal access rights you have for using your computer because of two reasons. Number one, your privilege, your privilege to control access to your system and all the resources on your system and all your system-related tasks, whereas your access rights, your normal rights, control access to the securable objects, the stuff that you're using while you're on your system. Okay. Second thing is that your system administrator assigns privileges to you as a user, or if you're part of a group or account or something like that, they assign rights to you as a group user or a group member. but that the system itself actually grants or denies access to your securable objects, those things you're using again, on the access right you have been granted. So that's the difference between having a privileged account versus having a regular account. So if the information about your privileges that you have, they're stored in an account database that's maintained by the user or maintained by the group account or something like that. So when you as a user log on, that system is going to produce an access token that's going to contain a list of the privileges that you have, the rights that you have on that system, including those granted to you by the groups that I described that you might belong to. So those privileges apply only to your local computer as a domain account, and it can have different privileges on different types of computers that you might be using. So that's kind of what privileges look like and how they work in a Windows environment. Okay, I should have been stepping you through these. I'm sorry. All right. So let's look at the different types of privileged accounts. Okay, because when I mentioned privileged accounts, but there's different levels and there's different things that you can do with them. Okay. Before I do that, though, I just want to say one thing. When you have your Active Directory account, it's usually used for assigning those rights that I was just talking about in Windows anyway. And those accounts, again, should only be used when your privilege is required. Again, not to run regular activity on those accounts. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the different accounts. First, I have the local administrative account. And those are the accounts that are for those are your non-personal accounts. They provide administrative access to only the local host or instance that you happen to be using at that time. Okay, or that's used by the IT staff in order for them to go back and perform their maintenance activities. Next, you have your privileged user account, and these are usually the most common and most common that you run across. They're also named credentials. They've been granted administrative privileges on one or more systems in order to allow you or whoever it may be administrative rights on the systems that person is managing. We have our domain administrative accounts, and those have privileged administrative access across all the workstations and servers that's found within a domain. You have your emergency accounts. I did a whole presentation on what's called break glass accounts, which are emergency accounts. And what they do is they provide unprivileged users administrative access in order to secure, in order to get to the system if there's some type of emergency. They need to secure the system for some reason, and we don't have a sysadmin around. They might be able to get in and do it using an emergency account. We have a service account, and that could be your privileged local or domain account used by an application or service to interact with your operating system. And the last one is an application account. And those are accounts used by your applications to access like your databases, run your batch jobs, or run your scripts on your computer, or provide access to other applications that you might be using. So all these type of accounts that I just talked about, they pose significant security risks if we're not protecting them, if we're not managing them, and more importantly, if we're not monitoring in some way to make sure that they're not being misused. Let's talk about why it's important for us to 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 secure these privileged accounts. Okay, why it's important to us. And I'm gonna use this diagram to talk through this. But in most organizations, especially most of your organizations that's listening to me, the security of most or all your business assets is going to depend on the integrity of the privileged accounts that you have. Okay, that administer and manage your IT systems around your organization. So cyber attackers know this, and they're focusing on those privileged access accounts or those privileged accounts to your systems like your Active Directory and those other domains in order to rapidly gain access to all your targeted data. They know what they want. If they don't know what they want, they soon will know what they want once they get in there and start looking around. So traditional security approaches focus on using the ingress and egress points of an organization's network as their primary security perimeter. What I mean by that is that they're looking at what's coming into the network, what kind of stuff, is it malicious code and all that. And hopefully they're looking at what's going out, the egress point, what's going out of the networks, even though many organizations don't look at that. But the effectiveness of your network security um, has been diminished. And just doing this alone is not going to be enough. What I mean is this: organizations are hosting data and resources outside of your traditional network boundary. They're on mobile devices now. Every one of you probably got a mobile device in your hand now. Your mobile phones, your tablets, your cloud services. And I work at IRS. We have this BYOD, bring your own device policy now. I was just briefed on that yesterday, the new policy. So we have bring your own devices, which is going to put a thorn in your side when you look at just ingress and egress points. The second thing is that adversaries now are demonstrating consistent and ongoing ability to obtain access to your workstations, even inside your network boundary. They do this through phishing attacks and stuff like that, and web and email attacks. So, we have a problem with that. And just looking at what's coming in, what's coming out, what's going out is not enough. Now, when we look at where we place this stuff, the natural placement of the network security perimeter, and if we have a complex organization like the government or some of your larger organizations, what we look at is the authentication and the authorization controls that we have in place in our identity layers that we have. So privileged administrative accounts are able to effectively control this new security perimeter that we have, that's been pushed out beyond just our network. Okay, so privileged administrative accounts are looking at this, and it's critical for us to go out and protect that privileged access. If you look at what I have here, attackers can steal your data, they can modify your documents, they can impersonate users, they can disrupt all your business operations. And so we have to guard against that. Okay. Any adversary out there that gains control of our administrative account can use that control or can use those privileges in order to pursue their gain at the expense of our organization. Okay. And so we don't want that to happen. You can look at the slide and see all the different things they can compromise: our cards, our Active Directory, our medical accounts, records, all that. That becomes a big problem. And because that adversary can gain control of those privileged access using a lot of different methods that's out there, mitigating this risk, fixing this thing, it requires us to have a holistic approach. It requires us to have a detailed technical approach. And I'm going to get to that and give you one soon. Some pointers, some ideas that you might be able to use. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a 3-level roadmap that's going to help you to harden the elements of your environment and that enable your privileged access, because that's what's important. Stop them from getting in the first place. Okay. But first, let me examine how an attack ever even occurs in the first place and what happens during an attack. Okay. So what I have here, I'm calling it the life cycle of a hack attack. And usually attack timeline includes 3 main phases. First, the person has to initiate the attack. Okay. I won't even really call this an attack because nothing has happened to you yet, just yet. They haven't broken any laws, let's say. So what happens here is research and preparation. And the attacker is going to get some initial information, an initial foothold through spear phishing, through looking at unpatched edge devices and finding those. And they're going to use that commonly available information that's out there from Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and places like that to create a plan, to create an attack that's going to provide them that initial foothold into your organization, usually through some type of compromised workstation or something like that. Then they're going to escalate their privileges. So here they're inside your environment, and they're increasing their access using credentials, or not just credentials, but they're using credential theft tools and techniques that can be easily downloaded from the internet. So you don't have to be sophisticated in order to carry out something like this. Okay. And then they execute their mission. So they're going to now, I don't know what their mission is, and the mission is going to vary, but they're going to work silent and undetected for a while. They're going to exfiltrate stuff for probably many months, or they're going to do something that's a new trend now, and they're going to use some ransomware to get you to pay to get access to your own information. So these advanced cybersecurity attackers, these hackers out here now, they can nest inside your network for a long time. They say the average now is over 200 days before they even discovered. If you look at the Sony pictures breach that happened a couple years ago, I think it was, the hackers infiltrated the network for over a year before they were detected. That's a long time for an attacker to be out there stealthily gathering private data and stuff from your internet, from your network, looking at your communications and mapping that network and planning their attack. Now, one thing that effective hacks have in common is that ability for them to remain covert. Right up to the moment where the time is right and they're ready to go out and strike, like they did with Sony. And that's when movies start coming out, and that's when information and emails start coming out. They wait for that moment and then they make it happen. So while the precise methods of those attacks might vary, they're usually going to be implemented using some similar steps. And I'm going to go over those steps real quick. So here's the life cycle, further life cycle of an attack. And I want you to look at the numbers I have below, okay? The things I have numbered below. The first thing they do is reconnaissance. So before launching that attack, and this is taking those three I just gave you a little bit deeper, but before launching that attack, the hackers is going to identify a vulnerable target, and they're going to explore the best way to exploit that target. And that initial target can be anybody in your organization. I'm not going after the top gun all the time. I'm not going after the CEO. I'm going to go after the janitor. I'm going to go after the receptionist, or whoever that person may be, whether it's an executive or just an administrative assistant. Now, the attacker is going to simply need a single point of entrance, and that's what I'm looking for to get started. So they do targeted phishing emails, comment in this step, things like that. Basically, that's an effective way for them to distribute malware so they can get into your system. The second is scanning. So once that target is identified, the next step is going to be to identify a weak point that's going to allow me access into your network. Now, this is usually accomplished by me scanning your network or using tools and things that I can easily, again, find on the internet. And again, I'm probing for entry points. And this step of the process usually goes pretty slow. You don't know I'm there. So I have all the time in the world. I can take my time. I can search around and find the things I'm looking for. It can last for months, as I search for the vulnerabilities I'm looking for in your system. Then I'm going to access and escalate. So now that I found the weaknesses in your target network and I've identified those, I'm going to gain access and I'm going to escalate. And in almost every case, your privileged access is going to be needed because it allows me to move freely within the environment. If I have your password and the system think I am you, then I can move around as much as I want, right? I might not be. They might wonder why Derek the janitor is looking at the finance documents or the finance accounts, but you probably won't even know that for a while. Now, there are things like rainbow tables and similar tools out there that can help me steal your credentials, escalate my privilege to administrative, system admin at this point, and then get into any system on the network that I want to. That's accessible anyway via that administrator account once I have it. So once I gain elevated privileges, I've effectively taken over the network. You've been owned. I've owned you. All right. People always say I have the keys of the kingdom. That's what I have. You've been owned. Next, I start exfiltration. So now I have the freedom to move around in your network, and now I can access systems within your most sensitive data in it, and I can extract that on will because you don't even know I'm there. But still in private data is not the only action that I can take at this time. I can also change and erase files so you won't even know I'm there. Remember, I was a federal agent. I'm an investigator. The thing I want to do as a bad guy is erase my steps. I don't want you to know I was even there. If you don't know I was there, there's no crime that you know of that's been committed, and you won't chase me down. That's what I want. Okay. I also want sustainment. So once I have gained that unrestricted access and I can go back and forth where I want to because I've erased my footprints, next I want to sustain. I want to stay in place, and I want to stay in place quietly. So to accomplish this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to secretly install some malicious program like a rootkit onto your system that's going to allow me to return as much as I want to. And then with those elevated privileges that I've gotten, I'm going to I'm not going to need a single access point anymore. I can come and go as I please, okay? Because now the system sees me as an insider, as somebody that should be there. And then I'm going to assault you. That's the next step, okay? So this step is not done by everybody. It's not done in every cyber attack, but I'm telling you it's something that can be done. This is when things usually get really nasty if I want them to get nasty. This is where I might alter the functionality of your hardware system or disable your hardware entirely where it won't work at all. If you think about Stuxnet, so I can say it correctly, when it happened in Iran, remember, if you don't know about it, that was an attack to Iran's critical infrastructure. This is where they did some malicious stuff. They wanted to break some things down. So during the assault phase, the attack ceases to be stealthy at this time. You know I'm there. You know I'm hitting you. You know I'm assaulting you. But I've already effectively taken control of your environment. So it's usually too late for you to do anything about it. You've already been breached. It's going to be hard for you to defend yourself because now you're being reactive while I've been proactive for months to years. Next is obfuscation. Okay, so usually I want to hide my track, as I told you before, but this is not always the case. Especially if I want to leave a calling card, I want you to know I've been there. I'm I can't think of the name of that organization that used to hit everybody not too long ago. It might still be out there, but I want you to know it was me. Okay, so I want to leave something behind that boasts about my exploits, my abilities to get into your system. So the purpose of obfuscation is to confuse you, to disorient you, to divert you when you start to doing your forensic examination process. Do I want you to find me? Of course not. I want you to find somebody else. Hopefully, my somebody that's part of my zombie trial, my zombie account, or. So basically, what happens is that obfuscation covers a variety of different techniques and tools, like cleaning out the logs with log cleaners, like spoofing, like misinformation, like again zombie accounts and using those, and a lot of other stuff, Trojan commands and things like that. So these are the seven. This is the life cycle of a hack attack. How do I defend myself against this? It starts at the beginning, folks. Here it is. The key. Usually, first of all, again, I told you that almost every network out there. If I didn't tell, I'm telling you now. Almost every network out there is vulnerable to a cyber attack. There's a study out by Mandiant that says 97% of all organizations have already been breached at least once. You might be one of them, even though you don't know it yet. Okay. And perimeter security tools that we put in place, like those firewalls, all that kind of stuff like that, they don't do anything. They offer little protection against advanced targeted attacks. I don't want to scare you, but that's the truth. If I want to get in, I can get in. So the key to blocking cyber attacks is controlling privileged access. Each step, as it says, each step beyond number 3 that I gave you before, all those takes me acquiring privileged access or privileged credentials for me to succeed. So what I want to do, privileged identity management can automatically discover privileged accounts throughout my network. It can bring those accounts under management. It can give me an auditing process for those. And each privileged credential, I can update those continuously in an automated process if I'm using my PAM accounts correctly. And what is this going to do? This is going to negate the damage that's going to be inflicted by an advanced cyber attack. Let me tell you, I said 97% of you are going to be breached, right? It's very difficult to stop it from happening. What I want to do is I want to stop the bleeding. I want to lower the damage. I want to decrease the damage that's done through this process. All right. If you have the ability to control privileged access, that cyber attack can be significantly mitigated by you. Not 100%, perhaps so. Okay. All right. So anyway, if you look at the damage done to Target, to Sony that I mentioned, to all the others, and use your PAM system, you can prepare your crisis management team to be more. You probably still reactive because of the attack, but you be more ready for that attack should something occur, because that PAM is going to give you information. It's going to give you control. It's going to give you ability to deal with these type of things. Okay. Let's look at the attack. I told you I want to talk about the pass the hash attack. That's one type of attack. So basically, this attack, this pass the hash attack, what it does is it uses a technique where an attacker captures your account logon credentials that you had before on one computer, and then they use those credentials to authenticate to other computers on your network. Now, I'm gonna tell you why that happens in just a second. So that pass the hash attack, I'm gonna call it PTH. I want to keep saying that, but that PTH attack is gonna be very similar in concept to what they call a password theft attack. I'm stealing your password, but it relies instead on me stealing and reusing password hash values rather than the actual password. I don't need to know your password. I need to know the numerical value that your password produces. That's your hash. Okay, that password hash value, if you don't know, that's a one-way mathematical representation of your password, and it can be used directly by an authenticator to access services on behalf of you. as your user. Let's think about single sign-on. When you do single sign-on, you sign on one time, and then that code is used to get you into all these different, that value to get you into all these different places within the system. So think about that. Once you're in, you're in. So once I compromise that, it's compromised. So as I said, I get it on one computer that you use, and because you didn't reset your password, I can use it for other systems that you have access to. So to use this technique, what I have to do is I have to obtain excuse me, local administrative access on a computer in your organization already to steal your credentials from your computer disk or from your memory or whatever. And then this level of privilege is going to allow me to not only obtain your password hashes, but also any other credentials that you might have stored on your compromised computer. So if I find a file that says passwords, guess what? I'm going in that file and I'm looking at all your passwords. So I can obtain local administrator access by either compromising your built-in local administrator account, or a domain account with membership in your local administrators group, or another local account that can be used to install drivers or applications or execute applications or what have you. And I can start using those. So this PTH technique that I'm describing here allows me to have compromised, well, after I've compromised your single computer, to gain access to your connected computers, including your domain controllers, which is important, and the other services that's going to be storing that sensitive information that I want to get my hands on. So for this reason, to mitigate the risk of, let's say, this pass the hash attack and other attacks like this, other credential theft attacks, I can improve the security posture around that, around Active Directory, by deploying some of the things I'm going to talk about today, and basically by ensuring that my credentials don't get compromised in the first place. Okay, let's take a look at what I have on the slides here. First, it says elapsed time, 8 hours or less. I'm trying to get credentials. It says malicious tactics like social engineering and phishing schemes are used to trick you into giving me your credentials. Okay. It says here most organizations do not recognize when attackers are already within the network and have access to the information. Next, I want to get the data. 24 hours or less, I'm going to get the data. So the attack doesn't stop there. It says attackers look for the next set of credentials with elevated privileges to access servers. And once I get the credentials, I'm going to access and I'm going to start taking money. You risk losing revenue, your brand reputation, your business continuity, and things like that. Next, I'm going to get control. My ultimate goal is to get control, gain access to those domain controllers, gain access to everything so that I can control it. So how do I stop it? Well, first of all, here's some of the activities I do. I can do two things: lateral movement or privilege escalation. So with lateral movement, what I do is once I get your credentials, I move from one computer to gain access to another computer of the same value to the organization. If you look at privilege escalation, I use the credentials, of course, to escalate my privilege from one computer to another of a higher value in your organization. So this is my goal. How do I stop it? How do I defend against, like, say, this kind of attack? First, I can restrict and protect my access to high privilege accounts. Restrict and protect the access. Number two, I can restrict and protect local accounts with administrative privileges. And number three, I can restrict inbound traffic using the Windows firewall. So I can use the firewall, but you notice the first two mitigations is to control access. Okay, once again. All right. So what problems can an actual PAM solution do for you? How can it help you in your Windows environment? So a real concern of mine and a real concern for you should be it's people gaining access to your resources within your Active Directory environment. Okay, particularly is the news about the vulnerabilities. Troubling is the news about the vulnerabilities, unauthorized privilege escalations, and all the different types of unauthorized access, including that pass to hash that I just talked about. Today it's too easy, way too easy for attackers to obtain your domain admin account credentials, and it's too hard for you to discover these attacks after the fact. Okay, the goal of a PAM solution is for me to reduce the opportunities for malicious users to get access in the first place, while increasing the amount of control I have and the amount of awareness I have in my environment. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so PAM makes it harder for attackers to penetrate your network in the first place, and for them to obtain those privileged account access. And what it does is it adds a layer of protection to your privileged groups that control access across a whole lot of ranges of domain joined computers that might be on your system and applications that might be on those computers. And what it does also is that it adds more monitoring for your program, more visibility to what's happening on your network, more fine-grained controls for me to see who my privileged administrators are and what they're doing when they're using those credentials. Okay, because administrators they're not security experts most of the time, and they cause some of the problems. But like I said earlier, taking their credentials and going on the outside and using those while they're surfing the internet and then getting compromised. Pam gives me more insight into how administrative accounts are used in my environment, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm looking at. So it says privilege access management on my slide can be accomplished with two goals. Okay, basically it's a solution that helps me restrict that privileged access within my Active Directory environment, and that's what I want. Okay, it's going to help me reestablish control over my compromised Active Directory system if it's compromised by maintaining, it says, a separate bastion environment that we know has been unaffected by that malicious attack. It helps me isolate the use of privileged accounts to reduce the risk of those credentials being stolen in the first place. If I don't have a bunch of people out there using accounts, then a bunch of accounts won't be compromised. Okay. There's two ways for me to do this. I'm sorry, I'm just catching up here. Sorry. I should have. I talk so much instead of moving. Okay, but there's two ways to do this to secure your Windows privileged accounts. Number one, I can do it manually. So this is better than doing nothing, but it's close to doing nothing. Okay, manually protecting, manually managing, monitoring your privileged account. It's a tedious process, especially if you're a large organization. You're gonna have thousands of these accounts, at least hundreds of them. So it's gonna be tedious. It's gonna be time consuming. It's gonna be resource draining. And guess what? As I've seen in the field, you're probably not going to do it. You're not going to do it on a regular basis. You're not going to do it as often as you should. So it's going to become increasingly difficult, almost impossible for you to manually audit the thousands of privileged accounts that might be out there on a daily basis. It's not something you do once a month. It's not something you schedule once a week. You have to be doing this daily. Do you have the resources for that? Also, manual solutions are going to be minimally effective if you have any size, if if you're trying to grow as a business. So if you're trying to scale it, if you're trying to audit, if you're trying to report out, it's going to be very difficult for you to do that. The second thing I have is privileged account security solutions, or privileged account management solutions, I like to call them. So if you're a mid or large size organization, you're going to find it more efficient for you and ultimately more effective for you to purchase and manage your own privileged account security solution, or contract a managed service out to an expert who knows what they're doing, who has proven solutions, and they can help you do this correctly, and probably do it for cheaper than maintaining, resources and personnel and stuff in your own organization. Okay, so we want to help you build enterprise solutions that's protecting you, managing, monitoring those privileged users, those sessions, your applications, while at the same time integrating some of your existing security investments that you've already made, like your security information event management or your SIM system solutions. These are the kind of things that you need to put in place, and the kind of things you need to focus on. Taking that further, I said I was going to give you a kind of a roadmap for protecting your Windows privileged access. And here it is, folks. Here's the glory, here's the gold, okay? I give it to you briefly, but these are 3 different phases that you can put in place. So once you decide whether you want to manually maintain your protection or partner with an expert, which I suggest, this 3-phase method can be deployed for your protection while of those Windows accounts that you have. Now, each phase I have here that I'm going to talk about, they get progressively more complex, okay? Which means with more complexity comes more of an investment. But the more of these you do, the safer you're going to be, and the safer your Windows accounts are going to be. So the first one is phase 1 is mitigate your frequent attack vectors. Okay, I want you to look at how you can basically find the problems that's already out there. Maybe an expert come in, do a scan for you. You do some type of penetration testing, whatever it is, to find out what your attack vectors are. Where are you weak? And once you do that, you want to build upon that weakness. You want to fix that weakness. There's a couple more bullets I see I left off, but I want to talk about. Once you do that, or another thing you should do, you should build at this basic level a separate administrative account for your administrative tasks. Don't have your administrator going out using the same account to do various things. Okay, set up a dedicated privileged access workstation for your Active Directory administrators, so where they only use that computer when they're doing Active Directory tasks. That's another thing I recommend. Also, you want to implement local administrative password solutions so it can generate a unique local admin or admin password for your workstation and your servers. This should be done frequently. Almost after every use, you should be generating a new password if you really, really want to be safe. Move to phase two. Add visibility into your administrative activity and build a wall against common follow-up attacks. You want to have something that's gonna target your administrative accounts. I'm sorry, if people are targeting your administrative account, looking at those administrative accounts. You want to expand the privileged access workstation concept that I just talked about from Active Directory administrators to only enterprise admins. Now we've narrowed it down even to fewer users so that we won't make a mistake, so that they won't be compromised. I want to turn off additional features like Credential Guard and RDP restricted administrator groups so I can try to harden those workstations. Okay. I want to turn off, or well, I shouldn't say turn off, but I want to use time-bound privileges so there's no permanent administrator. I don't want somebody to log in and they stay logged in. I want to use some type of time-bound privilege where it's going to expire after a certain amount of time. I want to turn on, I'm going to catch up here, turn on multi-factor authentication. Okay, to elevate those ordinary accounts to privilege levels, and I want to enable what's called just enough administrative or just enough administration to manage those domain controllers. That means least privilege, folks. That means giving them just what they need to be able to do what they need to do. I want to lower the attack surface on domain controllers. I want to develop methods to detect real-time attacks. And then moving on to 3, I want to move into role-based administration and implement models to delegate privileges. I want to create separate what they call forests for Active Directory administrators to provide a second security boundary that you have to get through to protect accounts at the highest privileges. Okay, and you can use smart card technology. You can use Microsoft password authentication technology in order to build more security into your systems as well. Okay. All right. So what do I do then? I gave you 3 phases, right? And I gave it to you kind of quick, and you can go back and listen to this again and take a look at it. But I really want you to focus on phase 2, where that attacker has an initial foothold in your environment. I want you to go look at that again and do work around there. Look at some of the suggestions I gave you there. I want to block phase 1, the research and preparation phase, and make sure that people are not able to get into your system in the first place, fixing those attack vectors that's already there. And then in phase 3, I want you to go out, and it says attack ongoing with attacker and control the keys to the kingdom. Now they're in your system, and I need you to go do things that's going to fix that area, that's going to allow you to get them out of your system if they're there, discover them, and put some real strong things in place like smart card technology and your password authentication technology. Those are the things that's going to help you build a stronger system. There's a few other things I want to talk about as well, real quick for you. Some best practices, and I have them broken down into 3 levels for best practices too. I have basic, I have medium, and I have high. Okay, so for these best practices, let's take a look at those. First, I want you to inventory and reduce your privileged accounts in your organization. Knowing how many accounts are there in the first place in your environment and where they are critical, that's the first step in making informed decisions about how you're going to protect your accounts. Okay. Once I've inventoried, I know what I have and where my privileged accounts are. I review that, and any unnecessary accounts I have, I get rid of them. I delete them. There's no reason for them to be there. The second bullet point is prohibit standard user accounts from having privileged access. Again, I don't want Derek, I don't want you, I don't want Sarah to have access with a normal user account. Okay, so I'm going to utilize separate accounts for general work and then a different account for administrative accounts. Okay, and another thing too, I mentioned it earlier, but you're going to enforce least privilege while you're using those accounts. I'm going to create a process for ongoing off and onboarding of employees that have privileged account access. When the employee that I have, they should understand the responsibility, first of all, that comes with privileged access, and they should be trained in the policies that I have for them to use that access. But once they leave, I need to make sure that they're offboarded properly also. And I need to make sure that I disable all those accounts that they have access to. And I go over the confidentiality policies and all that kind of stuff with them. I want to eliminate non-expiring passwords. I talked about that before. It should have some type of time ability so that people won't use password cracking tools to break into your accounts, or they won't be shared with other people because now the time has run out and they're no longer any good. I want to store them securely, and I want to tie all these actions together using some type of shared administrative account to a specific individual so I can have that follow-up. I know who's been doing certain things. All right, just a couple more. In the medium, I want to automatically change my privilege accounts every 30 to 60 days at least. I want to utilize one-time passwords. The only passwords that have never been compromised are one-time passwords. And why is that? Because you use one time and you throw them away. I want that same concept built into my system. I want to implement session recording so I can know what's happening in the system. I want to eliminate the option of interactive human login. I want the system to log people in for me if it's a service account. I want to implement a process to change hard-coded or embedded passwords. I want you to have to put in a password, not be able to hard-code a password in there so that somebody can compromise it and they can get into it. Without proper process in place for this, changing those hard-coded passwords can easily break something in your infrastructure. So you don't want to have that. You want an automated process. And of course, I want to have some type of focused auditing. And then the last layer, I want to use automated tools. Get away from that manual process. Use automated tools to do various things, like disable your inactive privileged accounts. Again, I talked about this earlier, but use multi-factor authentication. Use password verification and reconcile those passwords. Change and verify those hard-coded passwords. Implement gateways, implement request workflows, implement session recording, as I talked about before. And then you can go out and start being proactive, and you can proactively detect malicious behavior that's out there. All right, so how can PAM be established in your Windows environment? This is our question. This is what we're leading up to, okay? So basically, what I have here is that, 94% of your critical vulnerabilities that's reported by Microsoft, as a matter of fact, in 2016, can be mitigated by removing administrator rights from users, taking them away in the first place, okay? Whether hijacked by external attackers using phishing or ransomware that I talked about earlier, or simply misused by your insiders, local and domain admins rights can facilitate some devastating data breaches in your organization, things that you don't want to be responsible for, things that you want to avoid. So these privileges are prized by attackers. It's what they want because they can't afford the freedom of movement and access beneath the radar of detection. They can't hide all the time. They want to hide in plain sight. So they want to get those privileged accounts. So it says here that, on my slide, that whether you need simplified privilege enforcement, patent application control, file integrity, whatever, there's tools out there that can deliver the most comprehensive Windows privilege management capabilities that's available to you. And now what I want to do is I want to bring my partner Joe on, and he's going to tell you about a great tool that they have at Beyond Trust that can help you automate these processes that I just talked about. So with that being said, I want you to take it away, Joe.
All right. Hey, thanks, Derek. And thanks, everybody, for joining. Again, I'm going to jump real quickly through and kind of show you how we can gain control over those permissions. So in a minute here, you should be able to see my screen. All right. Okay. So with PowerBroker for Windows, that's the solution we're going to be talking about today, along with another solution that we offer. It's called PowerBroker Password Safe. So real quick, we want to address those concerns that Derek had mentioned there. gaining control over those privileged accounts. And so the first and foremost, we want to start with the desktops. So PowerBroker for Windows is the ability to allow end users some capabilities while still logging on as a standard user. So again, you can see here, I am logged on as a standard user. Again, that will continue. I will continue to be the standard user. It's the only account that I know the password to. Again, with a PowerBroker for Windows and our password safe solutions, this is the last account that you will need to know the password to in order to gain access to things that you need to gain access to. So again, when a user needs to require elevation for an application, we can throw them a prompt, let them know, hey, you need elevation for this application, contact your administrator. But additionally, we can automatically elevate the application. So again, providing the end user the capability to do certain things without having that administrative account or without having privileged account access on their particular standard account. And so again, here they just simply enter their own standard user passwords, and now they're able to install an application that typically would require admin privileges. So again, that's the core behind PowerBroker for Windows, is giving that end user some abilities without giving them the administrative control or without giving them the administrative password. And we can do things, we can restrict, we can stop users from accessing things. So typically a standard user should be able to access PowerShell, not in an elevated state, but I want to restrict it. So again, I can do that with PowerBroker for Windows. PowerBroker for Windows offers our management console to keep track of everything that's happening. So every time a user clicks on an application that requires elevation, every time a user clicks on an application that we're denying, we're going to keep track of that with my management console. Now, additionally, when we talk about solutions that offer some sort of way to elevate, there's going to be those rules, those ability to do those things that you haven't considered yet. So you may need to run an on-demand elevation. We offer what we call the shell rule. The shell rule will give us that ability to be able to elevate on demand. So if there's users out in the field that are remote that need elevation, again, we can give them that elevation with a key code or a passcode. Again, this is an option. We don't have to use it, but we have an option so we can control what they can elevate. So this code just gets passed back and forth, and now the end user can elevate certain things that I've authorized them to do. So again, the concept here is they maintain that standard user context, but still have the functionality, if they need it, to be able to do their job or be able to install or be able to make changes to drivers, etc. Again, on a one-time use basis, or if I want to be able to elevate. Now, when it comes to protecting those privileged accounts, so there are certain things, there's certain applications that I may need to launch that require privileged accounts, such as SQL Studio. So I can't just access that with my normal standard credentials. I need to be able to access that with a privileged set of credentials. So this is where PowerBroker for Windows and my password safe work hand in hand. So now I can pass a set of credentials along to an application without knowing those passwords. So again, protecting it so I never have to worry about, is this user going to use those credentials for something else? Again, when they connect, now they're able to access something as a different user than they were accessed their workstation without knowing the credentials. So again, that's how we're going to be able to protect those workstations to make sure those end users can still do their jobs, but still being able to maintain that standard user context. And when it comes to server side, so with our solution set, we do have a product called Password Safe. So again, I'm going to log on with my standard user credentials here, and then be able to apply and be able to access different resources in my environment with just my standard user credentials. And again, so the idea here is that we're able to use one set of credentials, again, being able to limit access from one set of credentials. So if I leave the company or if I'm let go, you just disable my standard user account and I don't have access to anything any longer. Again, all of that's controlled through one account. So if I need to gain access to a server, a privileged account, again, I can use my password safe and gain access to that privileged account. So when we do gain access, once I do gain access to my server, then we can use PowerBroker for Windows to control what happens on that server. And so again, this is brokering that session. So again, now I don't have to worry about knowing passwords. I don't know the account information. Again, it's all being controlled through my password safe. The password, again, is going to be rotated once I'm done with my session. Now that I've gained access to a server using that least restrictive model, now I can do things where I can block applications that are vulnerable, making sure those don't run on my server. Additionally, I can make sure that things automatically elevate. Because this is a server, I want to make sure users can do their job. So rather than logging on with a large credential set, a privileged credential set. I'm logging on with the least restrictive and then elevating as I go. So again, the idea here is providing users all the access they need, making sure they can gain access to the server, making sure that they can do the things they need to do on those servers without having the burden of knowing passwords, without having to enter credentials, changing passwords. Again, all of that is automated for me. And again, I don't even need to know the passwords. I can gain access to any of my resources and control what happens once I do gain access. So that's everything I wanted to show you today. I'll turn it back over to you, Sarah. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Joe. I'm sold. So, guys, let's go ahead and jump into our last poll. Here at Beyond Trust, we would love to help you with your PAM or your vulnerability management needs. Would you be interested in chatting with us or walking through a more thorough one-on-one demo of PowerBroker for Windows or Password Safe or any of the solutions that we have? I'm going to leave this up. If you select yes, somebody will be in contact with you shortly to schedule that demo or that conversation. But let's go ahead and jump into some questions. I'm going to leave this quick poll up. Derek, okay, so we had a question come in. Doesn't Windows Server 2016 Active Directory have a privileged identity management feature already built in?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was coming off mute. Yes, it does, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to ask Joe to help me with this in just a second. But Active Directory has something called the Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, and that feature is already built in. So, you know, what we have is that we have organizations out there struggling to try to protect their privileged accounts and their groups. And then a lot of people end up being built into those privileged groups, and they end up having high privileges. So this PIM, this privileged identity management that's on there, is a new feature that they built into Windows Server 2016 that tried to introduce some controls so that we won't have all these folks in there. So it builds in these controls, and yes, it's there. They do have some security principles that they put in there, because once the user authenticates into the system, that PIM domain is going to give them tokens and user IDs that's going to match those sensitive accounts in the account domain, and it's going to allow them to perform privileged actions in the account domain. So they are there. Joe, let me ask you though, why wouldn't you want to just rely on this PIM that's built in alone?
Well, because one of the things that you want to maintain is you don't want end users to know passwords when they're accessing critical systems. So again, we can remove the functionality from them even having to have the access to a privileged account by making sure that only the things that are required are gained access through either our password safe, and then maintaining that least privilege with PowerBroker for Windows, and then elevating applications as we need. So again, taking it a step further, maybe even using those two tools in combination to really gain control over what users and what accounts they have access to, and then make sure those passwords are maintained automatically.
There you have it. Thank you.
And there we have it. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to more questions, you guys, but it is the top of the hour. So I'd like to go ahead and wrap this up. A reminder that you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording and the PowerPoint slides shown here today within 2 business days from now, and it will come from communications@beyondtrust.com. So be on the lookout for that. A huge thanks to Derek and Joe today. Thank you guys so much for being here, and everybody who attended live. You guys rock. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.